Hi guys, it's me, ShazzaHD, and welcome tonight to the race preview for tomorrow's 2022 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Hopefully you guys are doing well. It's been a very exhausting day in Baku. Obviously, it's been a very long 2 days for me. Obviously, 2 streams earlier, 3 streams yesterday, and it's been a very hectic weekend in Baku. Thankfully, we got a pretty good session, a bit better of a session, honestly, than I expected. The fight for pole especially was a bit more... It was a bit more competitive than I thought it would be. I thought it would be a bit more straightforward than it actually turned out. Of course, going into the final run with those front 4 drivers, we had, Sainz in first, then Leclerc, then Perez, then Verstappen. Obviously, turned around massively in the end. But, hold on, let me just cough. Bit of asthma there. Probably coming through on the mic. Sorry about that. But yeah, the session turned out, when it came to the fight for pole, to be pretty good. The midfield fight in Q3 wasn't great, but in Q2 and Q1 it was pretty good. Of course, we've got an accident with Lance Stroll, which definitely affected things in the first part of qualifying for a couple drivers in there. But yeah, I thought it was a good qualifying session. It's been a good weekend so far, and I'm looking forward with the grid we have, as you can see on the left-hand side of your screen. With the grid we have, I am looking forward to the race because I think we've got a very competitive Grand Prix on our hands, and there's definitely going to be a lot of racing tomorrow. I have no doubt about that whatsoever. We haven't really, you have to remember, guys, we haven't really been to a track since probably the Saudi track in Jeddah that is known for being a track where you can absolutely overtake. Melbourne, I know they've done track changes, but it's still pretty tough. Obviously, Imola, pretty tough. Miami, you can overtake, but it was very, very poor grip offline. And obviously, Catalonia and Monaco, we know the case when it comes to those tracks. So, yeah, with this circuit, obviously with the very long pit straight and final sector, which is flat out, and obviously a DRS zone in the first sector between turn 2 and 3 as well, I think definitely we get a very good race tomorrow. It's not going to be a boring race, I don't think, at all. But yeah, let's first, as we get into this stream, let's first get into the qualifying results and look at the lap times as well. Just want to say, by the way, to you guys watching and in chat, hopefully you guys are doing well. Great to see you all here. And no matter what time it is in your part of the world, no matter what part of the world you're from, hopefully you're doing okay today. Have seen also a couple nice comments in chat. So, yeah, good to see that. And I will come to the chat for comments probably in about, I don't know, 20-30 minutes time once I've got through the top teams. So make sure to keep posting your comments in chat, and I'll definitely get to you guys very, very soon. But let's now get into those qualifying results. Charles Leclerc starts for the second year in a row the Azerbaijan Grand Prix on pole position for Ferrari. Ferrari's third pole position now in Baku makes them the joint most successful team when it comes to qualifying here in Azerbaijan. Sergio Perez second, yet again, the second race in a row and the third race this season that Perez has, on merit, out-qualified Max Verstappen. And brilliant job he absolutely did in qualifying today. In the end, his lap wasn't that great, the one he did at the very end, but still a phenomenal effort to be ahead of Max Verstappen. We know how great Max Verstappen is from last year and just his career so far. So, yeah, absolutely fantastic from Perez in today's session. Verstappen third, still looking decent, I would say, for the Grand Prix. And then in fourth place, Carlos Sainz, who, of course, blew his chance at pole position. George Russell will start the race fifth. Pierre Gasly sixth. Great lap by the Frenchman, who continues his great form here in Baku. Lewis Hamilton qualified 7th. Yuki Tsunoda qualified 8th, with Vettel 9th and Alonso 10th. And then it was Lando Norris in 11th, Daniel Ricciardo 12th, Esteban Ocon 13th, Zhou Guanyu in 14th, Valtteri Bottas 15th. By the way, shout out to Zhou. throughout qualifying. Bottas, very good effort by him. And you look in Q1 and Q2, he was 0.7 of a second quicker in both sessions. So Zhou, like I said, fantastic job by him. Unfortunately, Alfa Romeo not that quick this weekend, so he can't really benefit massively from it. And then in 16th place, Kevin Magnussen. 17th, Alex Albon. 18th, Nicholas Latifi. And then Lance Stroll in 19th and Mick Schumacher in 20th position. So that is the qualifying results from earlier today. And yeah, throughout the stream, you'll be able to see the grid for tomorrow's race on the left-hand side of your screen, of course. But now, let's go to the Ferrari team. Absolutely brilliant job by Charles Leclerc. That final lap in qualifying was probably the best lap he has done this year. One of the best laps he's done in his entire career so far. To improve by almost half a second from his first lap. His first lap, I can't remember it being that bad, to be honest, but he just found enormous amounts of speed in that final lap. It was incredible. That middle sector especially was just wowzer what he did in the middle sector. Yeah, brilliant job by Charles Leclerc, yet again proving that he is the man for qualifying in 2022 and by far the best qualifying driver on the grid for this year. Not overall, for their careers and talent and all of that, but for this year, you'd have to say Charles Leclerc is absolutely the man in qualifying, doing fantastically well for Ferrari. For Carlos Sainz, I do feel a bit sorry for what could have been. It probably would have been, because of Leclerc's final lap, it probably would have been a front row, I think, for Ferrari. And Carlos Sainz, maybe he would have got pole. Maybe he would have put in a great lap at the end there if he had not made a mistake at turn 2. But yeah, made the mistake at turn 2, went slightly too wide and got the car way too out of shape, and then yeah, his final lap was just simply not good enough. And obviously with Leclerc, Perez and Verstappen improving, which they were always going to, he ended up in 4th. That will not do his confidence any good, because obviously Monaco was a very good weekend for him. Qualified second, finished in 2nd, did the best he could, really. It was just, obviously, the team didn't quite get things right, obviously, 2 weeks ago in Monaco, and that's why Ferrari didn't win the Monaco Grand Prix. But, yeah, it would have been good for his confidence if he at least got the front row and improved his final lap, but, Leclerc ended up beating it anyway. That would have at least, improved his confidence a bit after his, poor start to the season. But yeah, not great for him to end the session like that. But we'll see what we can do tomorrow. To be honest, I don't think he'll be able to do that much tomorrow, because I don't think Ferrari will have the upper hand in the race tomorrow. But Charles Leclerc, at the end of the day, he has done the best job he could. Amazing lap. Now, really, it's up to him to keep it all together in the race, which I think he will. I don't think he's going to make, silly mistakes. I mean, obviously he did at Imola, but if you look at this season, Leclerc's only made really 2 big errors. One at Imola, like we said, with the spinning and almost crashing out of the race and lost a few points. And then also spinning in Q3 for his first run in Q3. In the end, though, still got pole position, so it didn't actually affect him. But if you look at this season, it's been pretty error-free from him. It's just Ferrari have not quite got things right, and that's the clear majority of the reason why Ferrari and Charles Leclerc are not in the lead of both championships, respectively. So, as long as Leclerc keeps it together, and most importantly, he has to, by lap 3, unless there's a safety car before then, he has got to make sure he breaks that DRS window, because if he allows the Red Bulls by lap 3, lap 4 to be, to be able to open their DRS if they're within a second, to close in on Leclerc, then as great as Leclerc is, he will not be able to hold back the Red Bulls, because the Red Bulls in the tow with DRS are going to be gaining 7-8 tenths of a second down that pit straight. It's going to be quite phenomenal, the speed the Red Bulls are going to have if they get DRS on practically any car, maybe except the Alpine in the race. If in the race there's any situation where the Red Bull is behind the Alpine for whatever reason. So he has a very tough race on his hands. Can he win? Yes, but he's going to have to obviously maintain the lead at the start and then put in, for the first 2 or 3 laps of the race, some stellar laps, very similar to Sebastian Vettel and what he would do back in his Red Bull days, where he would pull, 2 to 3 seconds over the cars behind and break that DRS window. Because if, like I said, the Red Bulls can maintain about a second behind by lap 3, lap 4, Leclerc is going to have to fight like crazy to win the Grand Prix. And that's discounting Ferrari messing it up for him with reliability problems, or obviously the infamous strategy of the Ferrari team. So yeah, it's going to be a tough race. From a championship perspective, honestly, I hope Leclerc wins, because I think it would be good for the championship. Also would be good from a certain perspective that, Perez would win, to make it even more of a 3-way fight. But I think, given that Red Bull, have won the last 4 races, I think it would be good if Ferrari did bounce back, because with the way things are going at the moment, it does feel like Red Bull could easily win this championship by the time we get to, the last 5 races. They could easily have it wrapped up comfortably by then. I don't want that to happen, and I'm pretty sure most of you guys don't want that to happen either. So hopefully Leclerc will, do well tomorrow. Hopefully, most importantly, hopefully his team will not screw him over in tomorrow's Grand Prix. But I'll just quickly get to a stat when it comes to Ferrari team. Ferrari have never won a race in Baku. They've had pole position twice in the past here, obviously last year, and Leclerc finished in 4th. And then in 2018, they had pole and Vettel finished in 4th. So it's never really been a successful race, the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. It's normally turned out to be disaster for this team. Hopefully that's not the case tomorrow. Leclerc, 1 pole position in Baku from 2021. Now he has 2. And Ferrari have 3 podium finishes in Baku since 2016. The reason it says only, as in, trying to make out it's not that great of a thing, is because if you look at every Azerbaijan Grand Prix since 2016 and where the Ferraris qualified, they should have had at least, 4 or 5 podiums, really. I think they were 3rd and 4th on the grid in 2016, 3rd and 4th in 2017, 1st and 6th in 2018, 3rd, I think Vettel was in qualifying 2019, did get a podium that year, and obviously last year Leclerc was on pole. So they've never really been able to convert good qualifying into good race results, and definitely should have had more than 3 podium finishes in Baku. And they haven't, like I said, won a race in Baku. Hopefully for them, that changes tomorrow. But now, we will go on to the Red Bull team. And Red Bull, I don't think should be that disappointed. I mean, given Leclerc's form this season in qualifying, and given how quick Ferrari have looked this weekend, especially in the middle sector, I don't think they can be that disappointed. I said going into qualifying, 2nd and 3rd really would be a good position for them to have compared to Ferrari. Of course, if they've got the front row or pole position, that'd be fantastic, of course, but I still think they're in a very, very strong position. Both drivers at the end didn't quite get the best laps they could out of their car. I don't think it would have made a difference, though. I still think they would have been 2nd and 3rd. Maybe Verstappen ahead of Perez, but still, for Red Bull, 2nd and 3rd. So, yeah, I think really they did the best they could in qualifying. Now, for the race, I think they're in a perfect position. I really think they are. I mean, yeah, could be better, obviously pole or front row, but to really attack Leclerc and to, get a 1-2 in the race, which I think is a very good possibility they can get a 1-2 in the race, given that they were going to get one last year and they were very quick here last year in the race. I think, yeah, with the car they have this year and the characteristics of the car, this great straight line speed, and it looks after its tyres well, I think they're definitely going to be very strong tomorrow. And I think, like I said, a 1-2 is absolutely possible for this team. And yeah, essentially what they need to do is hopefully the two teammates, Perez and Verstappen, don't squabble too much over position, because they need to make sure in that first 3 laps that Leclerc doesn't get away by more than, say, a second and a half. If they don't, if they can't get within DRS of him within a second, of course, by, say, lap 4, lap 5, that's not necessarily a very bad thing, because even if they're a second and a half behind, they'll still get a good slipstream from Leclerc ahead, and they'll be able to pull themselves closer and possibly eventually get within a second of the Ferrari. So really, I mean, I don't think they will tell Verstappen and Perez not to race at the start and, to just settle in for their positions at the start. But I think they will make sure to remind them that it is very important they don't lose time fighting each other, because, like I said, they need to make sure they work together to get after Leclerc, who is the main target for them in this Grand Prix. So yeah, as long as they can remain at most a second and a half behind, say, coming into the final sector, then that would be ideal, because during the final sector they would probably gain half a second at least in the slipstream and bring it down. By the time I got to the start finish line, they'd probably bring it down to a second or just under a second. So yeah, that's what they need to do, and they don't necessarily have to get past before the first pit stop, but just make sure they keep within a second and a half of him, and then either on track they could execute an overtake, which if they do get within a second of Leclerc down that pit straight and they're able to open their DRS, it's definitely possible, because the Red Bull is going to be a lot quicker than the Ferrari down that straight with DRS open, especially obviously in the slipstream. But they need to remain that close so that they can try and force Ferrari into what happened in Monaco, which is a mistake on strategy, forcing Ferrari maybe to pit too early and then allow the Red Bull drivers to do a very good lap after they've pitted, and maybe pit a lap after. So, you're allowing Perez and Verstappen to do a good in-lap. Maybe you do that. Maybe you split strategy and pit, Perez or Verstappen first, with the two drivers that close to Leclerc to try and force Ferrari into doing something. And of course, we saw in Monaco that worked a treat. So, yeah, they need to make sure they can apply that pressure to Leclerc, because we know that Ferrari, very prone when under pressure to making mistakes. So, yeah, hopefully they can, from their perspective, hopefully they can do that. And, I mean, if after the first round of pit stops, and probably the first and only round of pit stops, I would have to guess, I don't think they'll be starting the race, by the way, on the soft compound tyre, because we have the softest type of tyre this Grand Prix, and I just don't think, given the time of day it'll be and how hot it'll be, I just don't think at all they're going to start on the soft, because it's not going to last probably well enough to go even to lap 12, 13. I mean, we saw last year on the soft compound tyre, they were already pitting on lap 10, 11. So, yeah, I think they're definitely going to be starting on the mediums. But yeah, after that first and most likely only round of pit stops, I think if they are still behind and in second and third, then obviously at that point the only option is to overtake. But as long as they can stick close to them on track, I think it's definitely possible. I'd give Red Bull probably a 60-65% chance of winning. I'd definitely say they're the favourites, because like I said, I think they've got a better race car, and with the straight line speed they have, as long as they don't lose too much time in the middle sector, I think they'll be fine. So, yeah, I'm going to go for a Red Bull victory tomorrow. And I'm going to go for probably Sergio Perez, because Max Verstappen, doesn't have that great of a record here in Baku, and has never won here or even finished on the podium here before. And obviously, Perez won last year and has had a couple podiums in years past for Force India. So, yeah, I think Perez will be the winner of the Grand Prix tomorrow. And I would not be surprised. I'm not saying it's guaranteed or there's a great chance of it, but I would not be surprised if Red Bull got a 1-2 tomorrow. Because with that straight line speed that they have, and also the possibility of a Ferrari strategy mistake, I think it's very possible we could see a Red Bull 1-2 tomorrow and Ferrari falling away. I mean, with Leclerc, he absolutely has to win this race. So, and for Ferrari as well, they absolutely have to win this race for the championship. So, Red Bull know that if they apply the pressure, that Ferrari absolutely could crumble under it with the pressure already increasing quite heavily. But yeah, Red Bull for me are the favourites for tomorrow's Grand Prix. I would be surprised if Leclerc was to win comfortably. I'd be very surprised if he was to be able to win comfortably. I think Red Bull have got the best chance. But let me know, guys, in the chat, whether you think Ferrari or Red Bull are the favourites to win tomorrow's Grand Prix. Let me get into a couple stats, though, with these two drivers. Red Bull have 2 race wins in Baku from 2017 and 2021. I think Red Bull are the second most successful team, or the joint most successful team with Mercedes around this track, I think. Oh, no, they are the second most successful team around Baku, just after Mercedes. So, yeah, they've had pretty good history here. And definitely when it comes to history in the race, Red Bull have always done better here in Baku than Ferrari have. Like I said, 2 race wins, 2017 and 2021 with Ricciardo and Perez respectively. Max Verstappen, though, has never won a race or finished on the podium in Azerbaijan. So do not expect a Max Verstappen masterclass like we saw probably in Miami or Imola, because I don't think that's really as possible as it was back then, because at the minute, Perez, his teammate, is in very good form, and also this track just doesn't suit him that well. But Perez, though, like I said, he has a great history here. Won last year's Azerbaijan Grand Prix. By the way, sorry, Jesus Christ, for the spelling mistake on years that I was notified of by a commenter. But yeah, he won last year's Azerbaijan Grand Prix, and then also to prove how good of a record he has in Baku, in the 5 races we've had for F1 in Baku, Perez has 4 top 6 finishes in 5 races, with 3 of them being podiums. And remember, before tomorrow, he's only, in all those Azerbaijan Grand Prix, the 5 he's done, only 1 of them has he been in a front-running car. So that is a very impressive result, and that's why I think Sergio Perez will win the race tomorrow. Great form at the moment, he's in, absolutely, and I think, coming to this track is just perfect timing for him, given what he did in Monaco and what he's done for most of the season as well. But yeah, Red Bull, despite, not the greatest qualifying, I still think are looking very, very good. Now we'll move from the top teams, and we will now go to the Mercedes Works team. Well, we saw, didn't we, in practice, that they weren't that competitive. They were hovering between like 6th and 10th at best with their fastest car, which turned out really consistently so far this weekend to be George Russell. Not a surprise, because Lewis doesn't have the greatest record here in Baku. I know he won here in 2018, but it's never been a track where he's consistently done well. So, like I said, it's not really a surprise. I will say in the end, though, I thought their result was, compared to what they would like in practice, I thought their result was actually pretty decent, 5th and 7th place, because it looked as though at times it could be more like a 6th and 8th or a 6th and 9th with both Mercedes cars. So, well done in the end for, when it mattered at the very end, getting a very good lap out of the car to get, very good position there. But obviously for them, still nowhere near good enough. They're still, a second a lap off the pace of the front two teams. And it's going to be the same case tomorrow. I don't really see tomorrow how they can benefit in any way, with it being the race rather than qualifying. They just don't have a good car. I do think as long as things go swimmingly and they aren't, having trouble or contact or anything like that on any first lap or safety car restart, I do think they'll finish in 5th and 6th place with both cars, because I do think they'll have the quickest midfield car. I do think they have the best midfield car overall, but yeah, obviously not great for them. We'll get into in a moment the data, the sector time data and the speed trap data as well, to look at where they and other teams were doing well and not so well. But yeah, I'm not really surprised by Mercedes' lack of pace. The only thing I probably was surprised by was how much they were porpoising this weekend. I didn't think it'd be that bad, or as bad as it, has been. But if you look at their car this weekend, the saddest thing about it is, after Barcelona, we thought, yes, progress has been made. And it seemed as though that weekend they had probably the best car for the fast corners and the, just the high speed sections in general. You come to Baku and they are worse than Ferrari, objectively worse than Ferrari and Red Bull in pretty much every area. Straight line speed, medium speed corners, slow speed corners, porpoising, tyres. They're much worse on every aspect. And obviously, when that's the case, you don't have a hope of competing. I mean, even Alpine have managed to compete with Ferrari and Red Bull on straight line speed, even though they've not had the greatest qualifying. But for the Mercedes team, they have nothing really that could be, considered that competitive with those two teams from this weekend. So it is sad to see them, still so slow, but I do think things will get better. I don't think it'll be this bad for very much longer. I think they'll definitely improve the car. They're too good to be this bad for a sustained period of time, trust me. But yeah, 5th and 7th, probably the best they could have done today. And hopefully a 5th and 6th it will be for them tomorrow. Now we'll go on to McLaren before we come to the data and to you guys in the live chat. With them also, not great obviously, their pace and performance here in Baku. Not a surprise either. I didn't think they would be anywhere near as strong as they were in Monaco. So yeah, Norris in 11th, Daniel Ricciardo in 12th. The best they could have done. From a Daniel Ricciardo perspective, he did the best he could. We know, despite his win in 2017, he doesn't have that great history other than that win around this track. So I thought he did pretty well, to be honest, especially when you consider at this Grand Prix last year, Norris out-qualified him by a big, big margin. So I thought Ricciardo did pretty well today and did the best he could. McLaren's were really just praying for a toe to try and help their really terrible straight line speed that we know about from this season. So, with that was why they weren't able to really compete with the midfield teams. And like I've said already this weekend, in the first and second sector where there's some corners, they are right up there with Mercedes even. But in that final sector, they're one of the worst, if not the worst. So it's a really, hampering them just so much right now. And yeah, no progress at the minute has been made on that. Still just too much drag on this McLaren car. Hopefully they can make some improvements on that, at least by the time we get to the summer break. I can't believe they're going to go the whole season and not fix this issue, or at least make some progress on this issue, because I mean, I thought and I hoped, aerodynamically speaking, that they would be closer on performance to Ferrari and Red Bull, but they're still, pretty decent. It's just their straight line speed, it's hampering them so bad very similar in a way to the McLaren Honda days. Maybe, not as bad as the McLaren Honda days from a few years ago, but yeah, it's costing them a lot of points and a lot of good positions. McLaren, to be honest, if they had that straight line speed from last year that we saw in comparison to the rest of the field, McLaren would probably be exactly as quick as they were last year and would be probably ahead of Mercedes in the Constructors' Championship because, Mercedes have not been that quick this year. McLaren have really failed to capitalise on Mercedes' poor pace. So yeah, that's been very disappointing. And yeah, McLaren for tomorrow, I mean, they've got a good chance of points if we get the usual chaos and a couple people in the top 10 retire, which is definitely, if you look at history, it's definitely possible. But on pure pace, I don't see how they can, especially with Ocon behind the two McLarens, because the Alpine is the quickest car down the straights, and obviously the McLaren is pretty much the slowest. So if Ocon can be within a second of the McLarens, then the McLarens are finished, unfortunately. But yeah, not quick this weekend, but like I said, not surprised by that. But before I come to you guys in the chat, I am going to firstly go to the sector time and speed trap data. Like I said, keep your comments coming in chat and I'll make sure to read them out in a few minutes time. Yeah, let's go to the data. If we look at the sector times, here they are. If we start with the top teams, first sector, it's pretty much equal between the two teams, which is not a surprise because half of it really suits Red Bull and another half suits Ferrari. Maybe slightly more Ferraris where you could argue, but it's kind of half and half. But then look at Sector 2, 0.3 of a second quicker than Sergio Perez. That's why he got pole position today. An amazing middle sector by Leclerc. Carlos Sainz, I mean, if Sainz had gone, if he improved on that final lap even by a tenth or two, especially in the middle sector, then Sainz probably would have qualified at worst third. But like I said, didn't improve that final run. But amazing middle sector by Leclerc, and that really is, I think, only that's Ferrari's only hope, I think, for what am I on about? Not for 2022, for this, Grand Prix this weekend, is that they can pull away enough in that middle sector, especially with the Red Bulls in the dirty air, that we still have in Formula 1, obviously just not as much, but with the dirty air effect still being there and the extra speed Ferrari have in that sector, if they can pull away enough to keep over a second ahead, it will possibly be the reason why they win tomorrow if they do win. It is something we saw actually last year in Baku when, before Verstappen's tyre blowout, Perez and Hamilton were very close for like 40 laps. Hamilton had all the straight line speed, but lost lots of time in the middle sector because the Red Bull was set up better for the middle sector rather than the final sector. So yeah, maybe that will be Ferrari's saving grace tomorrow, but it's I'm not sure it will be, and I'm not sure Leclerc will be able to consistently provide as great a sector times as that in terms of the difference between him and the rest of the field. And then in sector 3, Red Bull about half a tenth quicker than Leclerc. It was, though, at times a tenth of a second quicker down that pit straight and in that final sector in earlier parts of qualifying. So, like I said, with the Red Bulls having a slipstream on Leclerc, plus DRS, they are going to be very hard to stop for Charles Leclerc, as we'll get into in a moment with the speed trap data. So yeah, Ferrari and Red Bull, overall for the lap, looking pretty close. I think the only reason it ended up being almost 0.3 of a second is because Leclerc's middle sector was so good and was an anomaly, really, for what the front four were doing up until that point of that final lap. If we look at the rest of the drivers, though, it's funny, in Sector 1, from 5th down to 8th, Russell, Gasly, Hamilton, Tsunoda. Of course, that is the starting grid in those positions, so they're all in that order, funnily enough, in Sector 1. But when it comes to Mercedes, in Sector 1 and Sector 2, they're not as competitive as the front two teams, but they're not absolutely miles off. It's kind of like 3 to 4 tenths in the first sector, 3 to 4 tenths in the middle sector, which is, that's still probably 7 to 8 tenths of a second, which is still a lot of time to be losing. But look at the final sector. Really not good enough. And that porpoising that has returned is a big reason why Mercedes have been, so slow or extra slow this weekend compared to what we expected. Russell, the quickest Mercedes, was 3 tenths, 4 tenths of a second slower than Verstappen and Leclerc. If they were performing as well in that final sector as, Verstappen and Leclerc, the Mercedes car, they would have locked out the third row comfortably and been, 3-4 tenths closer, which wouldn't have put them, any closer to the point of being happy, really, about it. But yeah, it's a bit alarming that they've gone backwards in this area despite cutting drag off their car that we saw in Miami, which did help in that race and the Barcelona race as well. So that is a bit worrying for Mercedes. But yeah, just 4 tenths of a second off pretty much in every sector are the Mercedes team. And that's obviously at best with George Russell, who was the quickest Mercedes man in all the sectors. For AlphaTauri, pretty much consistently good, except for the final sector, funnily enough. Not so good in that sector, but still decent with Pierre Gasly, who I think was just about in the top 10 of the drivers in the final sector. But yeah, overall for the track, AlphaTauri have a pretty good car, but I think Mercedes are just a bit better. And then also, if we look at McLaren, you can see great evidence of what I was saying. Lando Norris, for example, only, say 3/4 of a tenth behind Hamilton. Actually, let's compare Norris to Russell instead. So he's a tenth and a half slower than Russell in the first sector. Second sector, about a tenth. So at that point, 3 tenths down. If the final sector, if they had good pace through there, they'd probably be getting both cars into Q3. But look at the final sector. 19th and 20th. Absolutely dead last. And they are, compared to Alpine, 6 tenths of a second slower in the final sector. And the final sector is, of course, flat out. No braking, none of that at all. That is embarrassing. It's not as bad, like I said, as the McLaren Honda days, but that is an embarrassing amount of time to be losing in straight line speed. I just cannot believe they've gone back to this problem that we had a few years ago with them. It kind of feels similar with McLaren to 2018 with them. I mean, their car aerodynamically is a lot better now in comparison to the rest of the field than it was then. But you remember that year, they had a very draggy car. And for the first bit of that season, they had some good pace in the corners, but on the straights, they were so bad. They were easily still the slowest, even though they had gone from Honda to Renault power that year. It's very similar to that even with McLaren. But yeah, if they just improve that straight line speed, even if they improved it by 2 tenths, 3 tenths of a second, that would be enough for them to be consistent point scorers and probably comfortably finish 4th in the championship. But with that straight line speed that they have, that's going to be very tough for them to defend that position, because obviously after this weekend we go to Montreal, which is a power track. Silverstone, very high speed. Austria, power track. Paul Ricard has a pretty flat out middle sector, which they're going to really do horribly in. And then, obviously, Spa, Monza, Suzuka, very high-speed tracks, and they are going to struggle. So, yeah, McLaren, I think they will... they're going to have a massive fight on their hands, put it that way, to keep 4th in the championship. And then, yeah, other than McLaren, I think with Alpine, I think they may have gone a bit too far in the direction of low drag, because in Sector 1 and Sector 2, both Alpines are 12th and 13th, but in Sector 3, they are extremely competitive. Of course, Fernando Alonso, the quickest man in the final sector, and Esteban Ocon, despite being knocked out in Q2, still ended up with the 6th best Sector 3 time. So I think Alpine might have gone, like I said, a bit too far in that direction, because, if they were, if they maybe added a slight bit more wing to their car, then they probably could have got both cars into Q3 and maybe got Alonso up to 8th place in the Alpine, because they actually ended up 10th and 13th, a pretty poor result in the end, as we'll get onto in a moment. But yeah, other than that, it's not really anything else to see here, other than also Sebastian Vettel, very quick final sector. I think that, though, might be to do with a slipstream, because Aston Martin, I don't think, are quite as competitive as Ferrari, Red Bull, Alpine in high-speed sections. But those are the best sector times. Here is now the speed traps. So the speed trap on the left-hand side, which is the main one, not the one where the fastest speed is calculated. That's the finish line one you can see just to the right of it. But the speed trap one, I think, I'm pretty sure it's just before the DRS activation point, I think. So Alonso, as you can see, enormously quick in there, and also Alpine, definitely, without a doubt, have a monster of a car in a straight line. And if they are within a second of anyone tomorrow, watch out for what they do, because they will most likely be making overtakes if they can get within a second of any car. When we compare, though, the front two teams, up until that DRS activation point, the difference between Red Bull and Ferrari isn't that bad. It's only, 1 kilometer an hour difference between Leclerc and Verstappen, and you look at Sainz, it's only, 3 kilometers an hour, which is not too bad. But look at the speed difference between Red Bull and Ferrari when they get to the finish line, which is the highest speed these cars get to in that final sector. Perez, 343 kilometers an hour. Leclerc, 337. That's 6 kilometers an hour difference. And that, 6 kilometers an hour difference. And now think in the race, if Perez has a slipstream from Leclerc, that's, going to bring him closer. Plus DRS, that goes from a 6 kilometer an hour difference to 15 plus. That's why I say Ferrari are in a bit of trouble when it comes to that tomorrow. And Leclerc has to do everything he can to keep the gap over a second pretty much for the whole race if he's going to win. Because if those Red Bulls get in his slipstream with DRS open, he's absolutely finished. So, yeah, that's why I say Red Bull are the favourites for tomorrow. By the way, ignore Daniel Ricciardo's finish line speed trapping there, where he's, absolutely quickest of everyone, because I'm pretty sure that would have been him getting a tow or a very good slipstream from someone, because if you look at Lando Norris is second last. So, yeah, I don't think that is a representative clocking of Ricciardo's speed over the finish line. And you can see also in the speed trap, just before the DRS activation point on the far left, the two McLarens at the very bottom, and look who's just above them, the two Mercedes as well. So Mercedes and McLaren really struggling with straight line speed. And to be honest, if McLaren and Mercedes had the straight line speed of Alpine, it'd be a pretty competitive weekend for those two teams, and maybe at the front a bit more competitive, with Mercedes possibly latching onto the back of that fight. But yeah, very slow in a straight line. And with Mercedes, on the finish line, 334 for Hamilton, almost 10 kilometers an hour quicker is Sergio Perez, so there's not even a comparison to be had. With Alpine, when it comes to the midfield teams, look out for them. They're going to be super quick in a straight line. Also, Sebastian Vettel seems as though, maybe it was a tow as to whether he got such a good clocking of speed there, but does look to be decent in the final sector in terms of speed. But the Haas's also look pretty quick in a straight line. We'll see what they can do. Of course, Mick Schumacher starting in the back has plenty of overtaking to do. And then after that, there's nothing really else to notice. But yeah, certainly Red Bull have a massive advantage over Ferrari in a straight line this weekend, like we expected, but just wanted to illustrate it once again. And yeah, watch out for Alpine in the race. I'll come back to these pictures of the Ferrari. And yeah, guys, let me know in the live chat for the top teams, Ferrari, Red Bull, Mercedes, McLaren, and all the data I just showed. Let me know what do you think is going to happen for those teams tomorrow in the Grand Prix. And let me know, what you think of what I've said so far. And yeah, just make sure to post your comments in the live chat. Just want to say, for anyone new watching, I will be live, don't forget, tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. UK time for the race watch along. Still don't know if my co-commentator Niblo is going to be on, but I'm pretty sure he will, because the timing is a bit better for him than it would be for, say, Monaco, which starts normally 2 hours later than the race starts tomorrow for my time. So, yeah, don't know still about that, but I will be live regardless at 11:30 a.m. UK time tomorrow for the race watch along for the 2022 Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And then about 45 minutes after the race finishes, hopefully the race won't have a massive delay and red flag period. It should be the race reaction around 2:30, 2:45 p.m. UK time. If there's no, long delay, long safety car, long red flag. But it will be, no matter what happens, it will be about 45 minutes after the race finishes. And then, of course, I will be live on Monday night as well for a more in-depth and deeper review of what happened in the race in Baku. So if you are new to the channel, make sure to subscribe for that. Bottom right of the screen can do it right there. And as well, don't forget to smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. And don't forget to follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5 as well. Right. Let's come to the chat to see what you guys are saying. And I'll read out the best comments I can. I'll go to the very start. By the way, hello to Laurie Rastogi and John Hawkins, who says, cheers for stream, hope for good race. Scepter007 says, hello, Chaz, I hope you're having an amazing day. Keep up the good work. Always looking forward to your videos. Thank you very much for that. And says, watching from work. Laurie says, my drivers of the day in no particular order: Gasly, Leclerc, Russell, Vettel, Perez. Yeah, I think that's a good list. Maybe put Tsunoda in there as well. Let me just see what other comments here are just below that. Laurie also says, I expected Alpine to be quicker. I did as well. I thought Alpine would be at least a couple positions better with both cars than they turned out to be. Ottomo Parker says, just got done watching your quali watch along and you hit the top 4 on the nose, lol. What with my prediction? Yeah, I'm pretty sure I did, yeah. Yeah, it's not really a surprise, the result, I would say, but I think how we got to the result was a bit more surprising, with, Sainz leading the way, going into the final run and all of that. Hello to Aline, by the way, in chat. KH says, rooting for Russell for a podium finish. Aline says, just want a good race with a lot of crashes. Not sure about a lot of crashes, but a good race nonetheless is what we need. Let's see if there's some other comments that I can read out. Laurie says, at least Sainz knows what went wrong with his lap and knows how to improve, but obviously being confident behind the wheel helps. Well, yeah, if you have full confidence in yourself, you're going to be able to get over those little disappointments very easily. But I think Carlos is affected a lot more than, say, a Verstappen or a Leclerc is in, when something bad happens for Carlos, it feels like it affects him more than other drivers. I will say, though, Lewis Hamilton kind of feels like that as well, where, I mean, I still think Lewis is, for me, the greatest driver of all time. But when things aren't going Lewis's way, it does feel like he can go a few races where he's not quite at it consistently. I mean, he still gets great results despite that in his career, but yeah, Lewis is kind of like that. But yeah, I think still gets some pretty decent results despite not maybe being in his absolute finest form. Ultimayo Parker says, whoever manages Ferrari's strategy also oversees the DRS on Verstappen's car. Emerald says, Sebastian, when he was in Red Bull, had a much bigger car advantage to pull those gaps, something Leclerc doesn't, so I expect Red Bull win. True, but I think a big reason behind that was the Red Bull's ability that year to fire its tyres up on the first couple laps when, with the new Pirelli tyres, especially in 2011. The year where he really, started to dominate, did Sebastian. I mean, I don't think Ferrari really have a problem firing tyres up. In fact, they might sometimes fire the tyres up a bit too much, if that makes sense. And that comes back to bite them later on when it comes to overheating and tyre wear. But I think he can do it. I mean, I've seen him do it a couple times this season where he's been able to pull like a 2-second gap in the first 2 or 3 laps. So he can do it. It's just, can he do it for long enough to keep those bulls at bay? MSC likes the last position. Laurie says, I have to say the fact that Ferrari is yet to win Baku is hard to believe. I know it is, considering they've always been pretty competitive here. But that's Ferrari for you. I mean, look at the Italian Grand Prix, for example. I mean, since 2010, they've had, or after their win in 2010, they've only had 1 win there, yet I can think of at least 5 races at Monza where they were very competitive. It's just the way they are. They, like, with teams like Mercedes and Red Bull, even Red Bull, the last few years have been difficult for them. They still have pretty good records at tracks for victories, despite not being in a position to really dominate. Obviously, Mercedes have dominated, but they've had good history, a long running history of a few years of, great results at a track. With Ferrari, it feels like for every 4 Grand Prix at a certain track where they're competitive, they'll only win 1 of them. I mean, you could arguably say the same about, about not Spa, but Silverstone. That's also a track for them where they tend to be always competitive there. Not every year, but, most of the time they tend to be competitive there, but they don't tend to win that race that much. It's just Ferrari. That's just the way they are. They don't, most of the time, they just don't win races that they should win. And that's a big reason why they've won 0 world championships since 2008. And, well, given how this season is going, I think the drought is going to continue and probably go on to 15 years since they last tasted that success. Laurie says, I'm sure Red Bull will win, although luck can play into Ferrari's hands. I mean, if Red Bull have their reliability problems crop up again, that could really help Leclerc tomorrow. But Red Bull seem as though they've got that kind of fixed. To the point where it's not affecting them as much as obviously it was at the start of the season. Right, let me see if there's any other comments here. Read out. Mercedes in the wilderness for a few years now, I think, says McLaren F1 race. No, I don't think that's the case. I think, honestly, this might sound very confident of me to say this, but I think this year, I think they will eventually get some better results on a more consistent basis, and they might win a race or 2, because they still have an upgrade. I think they're bringing it at Silverstone, and I know at Silverstone they are expecting to be very competitive, and I think if that upgrade does work for them, And if it improves the pace of the car as much as it did in Barcelona, then they could get close enough to be right there with Ferrari and Red Bull. And if that is the case, I do think they'll win a race or two before the season is over, because their two drivers are too good enough. Not too good enough. They're absolutely good enough. I think is a better way of putting it, to get race wins, of course. But I think next year, I think they'll be back 100%. They are too smart, too good of a team. They are not just gonna, fall off a cliff. Normally, great teams that fall off a cliff, their success will end, and then the key personnel will start leaving. We haven't seen the key personnel really start leaving. I mean, there has been personnel go to the Red Bull and other places from Mercedes, but it's not the absolute top guys. It's more like the mid-level guys, who are still very important, of course, but they're not, people like James Allison, Toto Wolff, obviously driver-wise, Hamilton, or anyone like that. So I still think they are, still absolutely good enough to bounce back from this, and I think they will. I think next year they will bounce back, and they will be fighting next year for the World Championship, because, like I said, too good of a team, too good when it comes to drivers. And in fact, I think those drivers have made this car look a bit better than it actually is this season, because of how good they are. So, yeah, I think they'll definitely be back next season, no doubt about it. As long as they don't lose like a big person in their machine, I guess you could call it. John Hawking says, to be fair to Mick, he's in the top 20. That's really harsh, but he deserves it, unfortunately, because he's just not performing. So Rugara says, I would have honestly have bitten your hands off if you told me this time last year that Ferrari would be the fastest raw pace team on the grid and Mercedes will be a debatable midfield team. Yeah. I mean, I think if we knew this a year ago, it would have been a bit excited about, what this season would look like. But I mean, this season hasn't been bad, don't get me wrong, but I think definitely not having Mercedes up there to fight with Ferrari and Red Bull is hurting things in terms of the show this season and just the excitingness of the season so far. Because last year, for example, I mean, Red Bull, Mercedes were the two best teams, but there were races where McLaren would be up there. Obviously, McLaren won the Italian Grand Prix, probably should have won the Russian Grand Prix as well. There was a couple of races where Ferrari were up there. Obviously, Alpine won a race. It wasn't every single Grand Prix, these two teams. There were races where McLaren and Ferrari are off on the podium plenty of times. So I think with it being Ferrari and Red Bull constantly at the top, it is making things a bit more predictable, which is, not a great thing. But we saw in Spain where Mercedes were pretty competitive with Red Bull and Ferrari. That race was fantastic. For a Spanish Grand Prix, it was exactly what you would want out of it, considering what the track layout was like. So that's why I really want Mercedes to get back to being a front-running team, because if they are, it will be very exciting watching what happens up front with the top 6 positions. But obviously at the moment, they're not in that position. They're miles away. Hopefully, though, they can close in on those two top teams, because Formula 1 definitely does need it, especially with the drivers they have in their team. Laurie says, I expected Alpine to be quicker, but Alpine haven't been particularly quick here in the past. They did have a poor qualifying in Spain, but then was superb in the race. True. And yeah, I think definitely there's a good chance that they could be pretty strong in the race. I think there's definitely a good chance of that. Seirugara says, now McLaren is struggling to stay 4th and are only there because of the rest of the grid is average, and their Imola result was, so good. Kind of true, yeah. Let's see if there's anything else. Jan Sargent says, Red Bull straight line speed overrated. I don't see how you could say that. I mean, if I bring it back up, if you look at the finish line one, I mean, compared to the overall grid, it's not, it's not like Ferrari in 2019, but compared to Ferrari, their closest rival, it's a clear advantage over them. And in Formula One terms, 7 kilometers almost an hour quicker, or not 7, 6 kilometers an hour difference in F1 terms is a big difference. So, yeah, I think their straight line speed is, correctly rated. Let's see if there's anything else here I can quickly read out. McLaren F1 race saying the crashing Canadians, maybe their daddies need to be realistic. Oh my. Yeah, the Canadians not doing well right now in Formula One. Thankfully, though, it's their home race next weekend, so maybe they'll do a bit better than they've done the last couple Grand Prix. Now, we're going to move on to midfield teams, and we'll go to Alpine. And yeah, qualifying wasn't quite what I expected. I thought they would be, getting both cars into the top 10. I thought really Alpine would be as quick as what AlphaTauri were, but it just didn't turn out to be the case. And like I said, I think they probably just gambled a bit too much with the lower drag setup. Which might pay off in the race, especially if we get a couple safety car restarts and it keeps the field close together and allows them to, stay in the slipstream of cars ahead. But like I said, I think they've just gone a bit too far in that direction because they just aren't getting enough pace out of the car in Sector 1 and Sector 2. But I still think for tomorrow, they will be getting a decent result. I think Alonso's probably going to finish in the top 8 as long as nothing goes wrong. And for Esteban Ocon, I think there's a decent chance of a point, especially with those two McLarens being absolutely shit slow in a straight line compared to him. Ocon almost at the top of the speed trap, and the two McLarens very, very slow. Actually, let me get it back up. On the main speed trap on the left-hand side, just before the DRS activation point, I believe, you can see Ocon 323 kilometers an hour, McLaren 310. That's without, imagine in the race, for example, the McLarens don't have DRS and Ocon does. That's, 20 plus kilometers an hour difference. That's absolute filth, is what we would call that. Yeah, they are going to be, I think, fine tomorrow. Probably a double points finish at best, an 8th and 10th, I would say, which would be a good result. It put them higher in the Constructors' Championship, up to 5th ahead of Alfa Romeo, and put them about, how many points behind McLaren? 10 points behind, I think, possibly. So, we will look at the championship standings later, so we'll get to that soon enough. But yeah, it'll put them in a very good position going into the next few races, where I think Alpine are going to be pretty competitive between now and the summer break. I don't see their competitiveness really dropping off at all compared to the rest of the midfield. But yeah, Alpine, watch out for them tomorrow. They'll be pretty good, I think, despite not the greatest qualifying result. Now we'll go on to Alfa Romeo. Yeah, if you look at this weekend, they just haven't been competitive. I don't know if it's they just don't go as well on a street circuit. I mean, we've been to... How many street circuits have we been to this year? Feels like every race is a bloody street circuit. 4 or 5 races now? And only on 2 of them have they done well. So maybe that is the case. But yeah, this weekend they've been hovering around 14th and 15th place at best. And that's where they ended up. No real surprise whatsoever. They just don't have the pace at all. They don't really have any advantage over anyone ahead of them. With straight line speed. I mean, well, compared to McLaren they do. But McLaren are so much quicker in Sector 1 and Sector 2 that Alfa Romeo can't really compete with them. Shout out, though, Zhou Guanyu for out-qualifying Bottas. Not just out-qualifying him, but by an absolute mile. 0.7 of a second. So, great job by him. Hopefully starts to put in some good performances in the next few races. And really needs to, if he's going to hold on to that seat long-term, to show that he can compete with his teammate and team leader, Valtteri Bottas. But yeah, unless there's absolutely mental things happening in the top 10, I don't see Alfa Romeo finishing in the points, I'm afraid. Now we'll go on quickly to the Haas F1 team. And yeah, we saw yesterday in practice too that their pace was pretty poor. So what we saw today was not really a surprise. 16th and 20th. I'll reserve my time for Mick Schumacher for, just a moment. But I just want to make the point that this lack of pace, I mean, it probably is to a degree down to just the track not really working for the car. But this is a big, example of what happens when you do not upgrade your car. The last time Haas upgraded their car was the Emilia-Romagna Grand Prix, I believe. That was 6 weeks ago. Everyone else upgraded their car massively at the Spanish Grand Prix 3 weeks ago. And look how much everyone has moved on from the Haas F1 team. Haas are basically now at the back of the grid with Williams. How terrible of a strategy is this? I mean, even if at Paul Ricard they jump forward by, a half a second, 0.7 of a second, by the time we get to that Grand Prix where they bring this big upgrade that they should have brought in Spain, they're going to be too far behind and nobody's going to care. And they're not really going to be still in a point scoring, position for the rest of the season. I mean, I still think they'll score points between now and the end of the season. They're not quite that bad, are the Haas F1 team. But yeah, this strategy has just not paid off at all. And they're going to get worse and worse and worse until that Grand Prix. So if you're a Haas F1 fan, I'm sorry, but Haas are absolute idiots and they're absolute shit. Which, not really surprised because they've been absolute shit since 2019. Now, Mick Schumacher. What an absolutely horrifically bad weekend he's having. Now, I know people out there who would like to defend him, and obviously you have the right to defend him if you do want to, or if you do defend him in general. I know people will say, he missed not Q1, he missed practice 1 with a problem. Yeah, that is annoying for him, annoying for any driver. And it definitely affects drivers' weekends. But every driver during a season will have this. Maybe not every single one, but definitely 75-80% of the grid, whether it be because they've had an accident or a reliability problems, happened, or they've even been hit by another car. People in practice sometimes will have such a bad session and have it ended early that they'll miss a lot of track time. It's not an uncommon thing. That is not, I'm afraid, an excuse for Mick Schumacher. Also considering that the problem that, caused him to stop was not something that could affect his balance of his car after. It was a pressure leak, I think it was, with the Haas car. That's not going to affect the drivability, the handling of his car. He has just been terrible all weekend. He was 19th in practice 2. Can't remember where he was in practice 3, but I know it was bad. And then today, over 1 second slower than Magnussen and 1.2 seconds away from getting into Q2. That's horrifically bad. That's terrible. Nowhere near the level he needs to be at. He should have been really qualifying in 17th place at worst. That's where he should have been, which is still not great, but it's way, way more acceptable than 20th and last. Way more acceptable. And I'm sorry, despite missing practice, it ain't good enough. I mean, Valtteri Bottas is a great example of why it's not an excuse. In Miami, Valtteri Bottas crashed halfway through practice 1, and he missed half of practice 1 and all of practice 2. Yet what did he do that weekend? Qualified 5th and finished in 7th. Not an excuse. Bottas was still able to respond to what happened. And Bottas is, what caused him to miss that time was an accident that could actually affect his confidence and possibly even the handling of his car. You don't know. And then with the Spanish Grand Prix, I think Bottas missed quite a bit of time on track, and he qualified 7th in that Grand Prix. weekend and then finish in 6th. And if it wasn't for a poor strategy, Valtteri would have finished 4th in that Grand Prix. So it's not an excuse, missing a practice session. Not an excuse whatsoever. I've seen Max Verstappen lose a practice session plenty of times, especially with his Red Bull car that hasn't always been reliable, and he's still been, super competitive coming out of it. And I know, comparing Verstappen and Schumacher isn't great because obviously Max is much better than Mick Schumacher, but, comparing Bottas and Schumacher, I don't think in terms of talent there is that big of a difference when they're both at their absolute best. So I'm sorry, it's not good enough from Mick Schumacher. Needs to find a way to sort out these problems. And I think definitely the big reason behind his lack of pace this weekend, I think number one, it is lack of confidence. But the lack of confidence comes from his own poor performance. So there's nothing really that he can do a lot about it, actually. I was going to say there's nothing he can do about it. Of course, there's a lot he can do about it, but he can't. I think the point I'm trying to make is, he can't blame anyone else. It's not their fault. The reason he's not scored a point and been so poor is almost entirely himself. So, yeah, not good enough. Absolutely not good enough. And if he does this for the next few races, I'm sorry, I'm going to call it out every time it happens because I'm not going to let him get away with this because, I'm not a hater of Mick Schumacher. I want Mick to do well. I want every driver to do well because I want the grid to be as good as possible and have as good quality drivers and great quality drivers as possible. But a big reason why I'm going to keep mentioning his poor performances is because Mick is a lot better than this. It's not like he's Nikita Mazepin. If it was Mazepin, I wouldn't give a fuck. I'd move on. But with Mick, he is way better than this. It's not good enough. He has to step up. Yeah, I know Baku is a bit of a tricky track. It is for everyone. So, yeah, not good enough. Has to step it up. Obviously, what happens tomorrow isn't really going to matter because Haas aren't going to score a point. Canada, I kind of will give him a pass for that Grand Prix for Mick because obviously he's never raced around there before. But the final 4 races before the summer break, Silverstone, Red Bull Ring, Paul Ricard, Hungaroring, he's raced around those tracks plenty. He has no excuses when it comes to those Grand Prix, and especially once Haas put their new upgrade on at Paul Ricard, if it does work a lot, then he has to improve his speed for sure. Now we'll go on to the AlphaTauri team, and yeah, good session for them. The best qualifying of the season so far. Very reminiscent this session of what we saw a lot of times in 2021 with Pierre Gasly, consistently up in the top 6 in qualifying. I think in 2021 he did it for like half the races that year. So yeah, good to see Gasly back up there. Still, Gasly, I think people are overrating how, his drop off this season has been. Gasly has not been that bad. A lot of it has been, things other than himself, such as poor strategy, reliability problems. Obviously, Alonso hit him off and pretty much knocked him out of contention before his crash with Norris in Miami. So I think Gasly's been a lot better than people give him credit for. Yuki Tsunoda, though, the man on screen, yeah, he's been very, very good and good this weekend, and great to see Tsunoda in the top 10 in Q3 for the 2nd or 3rd time this season, I believe it is. Yeah, good to see there from Tsunoda, and they look to be AlphaTauri, the 4th quickest team. Did not think I'd be saying that at really any point this season, so great job by AlphaTauri, and I think they'll probably finish, say, 7th and 9th, probably. Maybe 7th and 10th. That'd be a pretty good result, though. They'd pull away from Haas behind them, and if Alpine were to overtake Alfa Romeo, then AlphaTauri would start to close the gap to Alfa Romeo and cut it down to less than 20 points. And with Alfa Romeo, if they do start Alfa Romeo to drop off, then you never know, AlphaTauri could get back into the top 6 of the Constructors' Championship. But yeah, I think most likely, given that Mercedes will be quicker, I think they've got obviously better drivers, and I think they've got a better race car. I think Gasly and Tsunoda, definitely finish off worse than them, but hopefully a double points finish for the two AlphaTauri cars. I do, though, have a quick stat when it comes to AlphaTauri. Do I? Oh, no, that's with Aston Martin. So not quite yet. But yeah, with AlphaTauri, yeah, I think they'll be absolutely fine tomorrow. Now we'll go on to Aston Martin. And this man on screen, if I can adjust the picture a tad bit better than that, and I can. This man on screen, Sebastian Vettel, of course, the four-time world champion, continues his brilliant season. Another Q3 appearance. I think this is his fourth Q3 appearance in the last 5 races, I'm pretty sure. So yeah, fantastic from him. Obviously scored points in Monaco. Would have finished 8th in Miami and obviously was 8th in Imola. So yeah, he's been just brilliant this season, has Sebastian. Great to see him doing so well and keeps up his good record in Baku. When he was in, previously top cars, he was always very good here. He had a podium here in 2016 and 2019 and obviously had pole in 2018 and probably would have won the race in 2017 had it not been for his own shenanigans. But yeah, it's good to see Sebastian keeping up his very good performance around the Baku track. And given how he's driving at the moment and how the Aston Martin performs on race day, I think they'll be absolutely fine. And I think Vettel will probably sneak a point in there somewhere. Well, I have actually said Gasly and Tsunoda I think will be in the top 10. Yeah, it will definitely be very competitive for the top 10. But I'm going to say Vettel will get, say, 10th or 9th or something like that in the race. I mean, Ocon in the Alpine, he'll come through from 13th. I'm pretty sure of it. But I think Vettel's got good enough speed to keep in the top 10 for the Grand Prix. And for Lance Stroll, did exactly what he did last year. Crashing in Q1. Very disappointing because he does actually have, as we know from the past here, good speed. Obviously, his first podium in Formula 1 was here in Baku. But, yeah, not great for him. I mean, maybe he can replicate the strategy of last season. That did see him actually get into the points. And if he had not had his massive tyre blowout at a really scary part of the track, and, once he had pitted and all, Stroll would have finished probably in 8th or 9th place in that Grand Prix when starting from last place. So maybe they can do the same again. Obviously, I think the tyre compounds this weekend are they are the absolute softest, but I can't remember what the compounds were like last year. But to be honest, if he starts on the hard compound tyre and goes 30, 35 laps into the race, then I think he'll be looking decent, because we know obviously he has good race pace. Aston Martin have good race pace, so I think they'll be absolutely fine on that front. But I would be surprised if he was to do as well pace-wise as he did last year in Baku. I'll quickly get to this stat to do with Aston Martin. So since F1's first race in Baku, Force India / Aston Martin have had 3 podiums in 5 races in Baku. Force India's 2 podiums were 2016 and 2018. Also, probably would have won the race in 2017, given what happened to Hamilton and Vettel in that Grand Prix, with Vettel's penalty and Hamilton's headrest problem. They would have probably won that race and got a 1-2 had it not been for Ocon pushing Perez into the wall. So, yeah, very good track this is normally for this team. And obviously last year, Sebastian Vettel finished 2nd in Baku, his only recorded podium of last year. He was on the podium in Hungary, but obviously had it took away from him. And yes, Sebastian Vettel has 3 podium finishes in Baku and 1 pole position from 2018. So very good track record Sebastian has in Baku. And I think Vettel will be fine. And you never know, if there is some craziness and Vettel can keep his nose clean, might be able to get some good points tomorrow. And finally is the Williams team. And 17th and 18th is pretty good. I mean, obviously benefited from Mick Schumacher being so bad and Lance Stroll crashing, but yeah, that was the best they could really do. And obviously, the only way they're going to get any points is if they pray whoever's in the sky. So, I'll go back to this picture for the moment. Actually, I'll just quickly go to the championship standings to remind you guys what it looks like in the drivers and constructors standings going into an important Grand Prix tomorrow. So in the driver standings, Max Verstappen goes into the race leading by 9 points. As long as Verstappen can beat Leclerc, then I would say that would be a good result for him. Doesn't necessarily Verstappen need to win, but Leclerc, given the pace of the Red Bull at the moment and given the momentum shift in Red Bull's favour, Leclerc absolutely has to win the Grand Prix tomorrow. Perez, if he wins and Verstappen finishes third or lower, then Perez will either get very close to the lead of the championship, or even maybe he'll, go into the lead of the Drivers' Championship. We'll have to see what happens there. But yeah, if Perez does win tomorrow, it will definitely close things up. And my prediction personally for the race is a Perez win, and then probably Verstappen second, Leclerc third, Sainz fourth, and Russell fifth. So if that was to happen, then Verstappen would lead the championship from Perez in second, and Perez would only be how many points behind? 8 points, 9 points behind, and then Leclerc would fall behind by a further, he'd lose another 3 points or so. So it'd be about 12 points behind. So still be close, it would, in the championship, but it would go more so in Red Bull's favour if my prediction does turn out to be true. And then obviously George Russell is fourth. Carlos Sainz is hoping to finally get himself into the top 4 of the championship. If he was to win tomorrow, though, and something happened to Verstappen in tomorrow's race, then he might be able himself, Sainz, to put himself up in the championship fight. Because obviously a win would take him up to just under 110 points. And obviously Perez on that now. So if he's going to get a championship bid going, Sainz, it wouldn't be bad to start it tomorrow. And then Lewis Hamilton 6th, Lando Norris in P7, Bottas 8th, Ocon 9th, Magnussen 10th. And then in the constructors' standings, Red Bull, if they can get a 1-2 tomorrow like I think they will, then they'll probably start to pull away relentlessly from the Ferrari team. And Ferrari 36 points as it stands behind Red Bull going into tomorrow's Grand Prix. Mercedes 3rd, McLaren 4th, Alfa Romeo 5th, Alpine in 6th. And for Alpine, if they can get 4 or 5 points, then they'll be able to start really gunning after and gaining after the McLaren team in the championship, because McLaren I don't think going to be that quick in the next few races. And then AlphaTauri are 7th, Haas 8th, Aston Martin 9th, and Williams are in P10, of course, last in the championship. But I'm going to quickly come to you guys in chat again to see what you guys have to say. And then I'll go to a couple last things before we end the stream. To be fair, very hard to be as good as Michael was. Well, to be honest, I don't think anyone is comparing Mick to his father. But it obviously doesn't help when it comes to media pressure. Let's see if there's any other comments here I can find quick. McLaren F1 Race says, don't rate Mick, hell of a nice bloke, crap driver, in their opinion. I don't think he's a crap driver, but I think he's when now the pressure's on, he's just not performing well at all. Aston Martin could overtake Haas by the end of the year, says Laurie. If Haas continue their form as of late, then it's probably going to happen. It's not that big of a surprise if it, were to actually happen. Laurie says 17th and 18th is pretty good. A car is slow when Chazza is saying that. Yeah, well, that's Williams for you. Williams have, been stuck to the absolute root of the championship. I mean, last year they finished in 8th, but it was mostly down to that Hungarian Grand Prix where they scored 10 points. If it wasn't for that, they probably would have finished 9th, which, I mean, yeah, one position better than Haas, but Haas weren't even trying. So, wouldn't have been that great if they finished there. And yeah, since 2018, they've finished last 3 times. Probably going to finish last this year as well. To be honest with Williams, I don't think they're going anywhere. Even with the cost cap we now have, I think they'll be at the back of the field, really, until, probably until a new investor comes in. I mean, obviously they've had a new ownership come in. Was it Doralton Capital, which I think is a hedge fund, if I believe. I might be wrong on that. Don't quote me on that, but they're not going to take Williams back to anywhere where they should be. And yeah, like I said, the only way Williams are going to get back to where they should be, or at least respectable levels, is if, a big foreign investor comes in and pumps a load of money into the team and rejuvenizes the team. But it's not going to happen under the current ownership. And the current ownership, by the way, they've not done anything wrong. It's just they're not going to really strive to make the team any better. They basically bought the team to try and make money off of it rather than, make it any better, which isn't great. But yeah, you can't really criticize them for making things worse, because you can't really get worse than last, can you? Right. Before I go, I'm just going to quickly, go to racefans.net to see if there's any news. By the way, Lewis Hamilton, he escaped a possible penalty with the incident with Lando Norris, which is the right decision. If he got a penalty over that would have been absolutely disgusting, to be honest. Carlos Sainz says running without a toe was his mistake after falling from first to fourth. That's not why. Let me just show the article quick. Here you go. Yeah, Sainz says running without a toe was his mistake after falling from first to fourth. Sainz said it was his decision to do his final lap without a toe. I mean, would it have cost him pole? Still, maybe, yeah. But the reason he didn't improve his lap was nothing to do with that. It was because he made a mistake. So, to be honest, I don't really care too much for that excuse, I guess you could say. Is Hamilton's recent deficit to Russell due to setup experiments. Let's have a look at this. So, here we go. So, here's the quote from Toto Wolff, who says, I think it's too early to try and identify a pattern because I'm very close to it and I can see that one session, one is faster and the next session the other one is faster because the car is on a knife's edge. If you put a foot wrong in terms of experiments on the car which need to be done in order for us to actually learn how to perform, where to put the car, there's 2 or 3 tenths immediately between them. The last 3 races, these experiments have gone wrong with Lewis and not with George. And then Wolff said Lewis has been trying some experimental parts of the car. There was a different floor solution on his car that didn't work. The car was pulsing more and bottoming out to a degree that it became dangerous and couldn't extract performance. So yes, it was a different spec. So that, you're wondering, is why Lewis Hamilton was struggling today in qualifying and just in general struggling. And also, I'm going to read this out as well from Russell, who I think I made this point in qualifying, in the qualifying watch along. But Russell made this point as well, that major accident due to high speed bouncing, just a matter of time. And then let's see where he gets to really that quote, or that part of the quote. He says, I think it's just a matter of time before we see a major incident. A lot of us can barely keep the car in a straight line over these bumps. We can see that. Here in Baku, it's really... For tomorrow's race, I really hope there's not like a situation when the car just, destroys itself. Because on that straight, 345 kilometers an hour, that is going to be an enormous accident if that does happen. And then he says, we're going around the last 2 corners at 300 kilometers an hour, bottoming out, you can visibly see on the tarmac how close the cars are running to the ground. Formula 2 are in the same position as well. They've got a similar sort of philosophy, and it's sort of just unnecessary with the tech we have in today's environment. It's just unnecessary how we're running a Formula 1 car at 200 miles an hour, millimeters from the ground, and it's a recipe for disaster. I mean, I see his point with Russell there. I see his point, but it's not like every car on the grid has this problem. Obviously, him as a Mercedes driver, he's going to say that because Mercedes have the worst porpoising or bottoming on the straight out of anyone. We've seen that this season, but it's not like every team's having this problem. If every team was bouncing this bad, then yeah, something should be done about it because it's going to cause an issue. But at the end of the day, the teams that are having porpoising problems, it's not because of just these cars. It's because those teams haven't fixed their flaws yet. They haven't got their flaws in terms of aerodynamic performance working like Red Bull have. And Alfa Romeo, for example, when it comes to not having that porpoising have a major effect on their performance down the straights. Those two teams, I'd say Red Bull and Alfa Romeo, maybe you could say AlphaTauri sometimes this season, haven't looked too bad on the porpoising. Maybe Williams as well, but then again, Williams is, slow as hell. But like I said, it's not like every team's having this issue. The reason this is happening is because those teams are having this problem. And to explain again, porpoising is basically where the aero generated from the floor at high speed reaches such a point. The reason it starts bouncing up and down is because it reaches such a point that the aero stalls, and then the bouncing up and down is the floor unloading and loading repeatedly at that speed. So it's not like it's just, a thing that comes with these cars. I mean, it is to a certain extent, but it is fixable, like we've seen with Red Bull, Alfa Romeo, and other teams. So I don't see it as a, let's get rid of this thing type problem. I don't see it being like that. And basically what he was advocating for in the end there was, let's change the regulations. We're not doing that. We're not going back to the old cars or completely new cars after 1 year because of this problem. The reason this problem's happening for them is because they haven't designed a floor that, from an aerodynamic efficiency point of view, works. That's the problem at the end of the day. And that has, that should not really hurt the other teams by going to a different solution. And I think the final thing I want to get onto is so Fernando Alonso. Where's Alpine on this? There you go, and I've got Alonso on screen. That's good. Fernando Alonso caught some flack at the end of Q1 because he affected a lot of drivers' laps, because he was actually the one who caused the yellow flag, I think, at the end there, and affected, I think, the two Haas cars' final laps, and I think the Williams as well. And there was some frustrations with Fernando, let's just say, when it came to, the end of qualifying one. But I got to read this tweet out. I did this last time, I think, for my review of the Monaco Grand Prix. Bit of a meme tweet from Battery Voltas. And it's a funny tweet. So I need to play it. Or not play it, but, show it. So let me get it up. So here is the tweet. Alonso playing 4D chess once again. Holds everyone up in the outlap, drives into an escape road, brings out yellow flags so others can't improve, refuses to elaborate, goes through to Q2, and basically says, go fuck yourself, to everyone who got knocked out, which is pretty much what the top 15 drivers do anyway. So there you go, Fernando Alonso, who doesn't love some absolute shithousery from the 40-year-old, who's still going Top Guns in Formula 1. And yeah, great to see. But guys, that is it for this race preview. Great to have you guys along as always. And yeah, I will be live. Just a reminder, I'll be live firstly tomorrow at 11:30 a.m. UK time for my race watch along for the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. And then live again about 45 minutes after the race finishes for a race reaction stream. Don't forget to come along to those two pieces of content tomorrow, and for, of course, race day in Baku. And as well, a reminder, I'll be live on Monday evening at 8 p.m. UK time for a deeper review of what happened in the Azerbaijan Grand Prix. Hopefully, it's interesting enough that I can do one. If it's not, then I'll, maybe do another topic or something like that. But yeah, make sure to come along to that later tomorrow in this weekend, and also on Monday as well. And if you are new to the channel, don't forget to subscribe. Bottom right of the screen, you can do it right there. And for everyone watching, don't forget to smash the like button and share this video and channel everywhere you can. And follow me on Twitter at ChazHD5. And don't forget to join the Discord server, link below in the description, to join our growing community. But guys, until my race watch along tomorrow and race day in Baku for the 6th Azerbaijan Grand Prix, or 6th race in Baku, it has been me, ChazHD. Goodbye.